On April 3rd, Wisconsin voters will not only be voting on who will win a 10-year term on the Supreme Court, but they'll also be voting on a constitutional amendment. The question is posed, should the office of state treasurer be abolished? Two individuals who are working to keep that job are with me here for this Newsmakers. Sarah Godlewski, is a management consultant from Eau Claire. Former State Treasurer Jack Voigt, good to see you again, sir.
Thank you.
Tell me about your organization. What's it called?
So the organization is called Save Our Fiscal Watchdog, Vote No. And it's a pretty interesting organization, actually, Steve, because you have somebody like Jack Voigt and then myself, Sarah Godlewski, kind of working together to save this office.
I understand why he's here. Why are you here?
So, very good question. My background is I'm a kind of recovering management consultant and also co-founded an investment venture. And when I started reading about this amendment, I'm like, I never would advise a client or invest in a business that didn't have a separate financial office. That's crazy, because in my world, that leads to all sorts of fraud and abuse. So if I wouldn't invest in a business or advise a client to do this, why should Wisconsin do this?
Well, Wisconsin has an audit bureau, and we have inspector generals. That's not enough?
Well, I will be honest.
In some state agencies? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, so when I was working to advise different government agencies on it, when we would look at why fraud occurred, the number one reason it occurred was lack of internal controls. And the reason why the state treasurer is so critical is that one of its responsibilities is to inspect and examine financial transactions of government officials. So what's different than like the Legislative Audit Bureau is that the treasurer doesn't have anything to do with the budget process. It doesn't have to do anything with how taxpayer dollars should be spent. It's completely separate. So the governor and the legislature together tell people, okay, what should our budget be? How much should we tax? And then did we actually spend it that way? The treasurer can come back and kind of be that fiscal watchdog then for taxpayers. Okay.
Jack, thanks for your patience. Now,
Indeed.
The state treasurer's office dates back to the founding of the state, correct?
That's correct.
1848.
Actually, it started before that. Actually, 1846, there was actually a constitutional agency that was created by the Attorney General, Secretary of State, and State Treasurer to have separate powers outside of the executive as well as the legislative branch of government. That was the founding fathers envisioned, as well as to make certain that these three offices were independent of the executive and legislative branches of government.
Constitutional office.
That's correct. And this amendment passes to be the first constitutional office to be eliminated in Wisconsin.
In the state's history?
In state's history, that's correct. And so my opinion is that I'm a constitutionalist first. I don't think any government official or any elected official should, or as well as a political party, should preempt as well have oversight over the state constitution. Our state constitution, I think, is paramount to an elected official or a state party.
Well, I'm glad you're doing this show, because let's all agree there's not a lot of awareness that this constitutional amendment is on the April 3 ballot, where you may only have 9, 10, 11% of Wisconsin voters.
Right.
So your first issue is, hey, this is on the ballot, vote and vote no.
No.
Okay.
That's correct.
All right. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, and I think in my kind of stumbling upon this issue and doing research, the one thing that really kind of stood out to me too, Steve, just not in relation with where's our checks and balances, but also if we decide to remove this office, Wisconsin would be the only state to not have a separately elected financial officer, treasurer, auditor, what have you. And some people will say, well, Sarah, I thought New York and Texas did remove their treasurer. Yeah, you're right, but they have a comptroller. And the comptroller has the same kind of fiscal management and responsibilities as a treasurer, so it's duplicative effort. We literally would completely lose those responsibilities, and we would not have an advocate on behalf of taxpayers doing that.
Okay, now.
Well, we also have,
thanks,
now,
go ahead.
the governor on his side of the aisle, I always say, the executive branch has a state auditor. We have a state comptroller, but again, who is in charge of those duties?
State comptroller is part of the Department of Administration.
Right.
Which
all these other fiscal ideas have been have control over or been part of the administrative or executive branch of government, but not a separation of powers. And so that's where I see where I came in as state treasurer, I did a number of things that were more than just being a bean counter. I mean, I did things on behalf of the voters, regardless of party. And I thought that was a very important aspect of this job. The current treasurer wants to, and has, and try to placate the executive branch and the legislature by saying, well, I'll remove all the duties and limit my staff. Why didn't he fire himself? Last 3 years, he's been taking a salary for doing basically nothing.
Okay.
So that's my
At this
opinion.
point, let's actually read the
Yeah.
amendment that's for that
Yep.
that voters will get on April 3rd. So, shall the Constitution be changed to eliminate the office of state treasurer from the Constitution and to replace the state treasurer with the lieutenant governor as a member of the Board of Commissioners of Public Lands? Is this the only duty then of the state treasurer now, Jack?
At the present time, that's correct.
Does one thing.
One does one thing. That's to be a member of the Commission of Public Lands.
Is that a full-time job?
No,
Having done that.
they meet only twice a month, probably about an hour, hour and a half each. So again, I think the last year he meets or does work about 40 hours for the entire year, getting a salary of close to $100,000 when it includes salary and benefits. So he'd be actually the highest paid right now, highest paid hourly worker in the state of Wisconsin.
So Steve, if I can chime in, actually, currently right now in the Wisconsin Code, the state treasurer has 4 responsibilities. So it has the trustee responsibility that Jack talked about that is responsible for helping to manage as that fiscal expert a $1.2 billion. The second responsibility it has is to sign checks and
The
deposits.
$1.2 billion is the assets of the Board of Commissioners of Public Lands. Let's
Yep.
clarify. Excuse me. Go ahead.
Yep, nope, that's a very good point. The second responsibility it has is to sign kind of checks and deposits. So it's on, again, going back to when the legislature or governor spends money, they are supposed to be there to check on that, so they sign checks. The third one is that examining and inspecting financial transactions of government officials. And then the other one is promoting the Unclaimed Property program. And so what this amendment does is it basically the signing checks, the inspecting financial transactions, and then the unclaimed property, promoting so people can get their money that they may have lost, those responsibilities go away. And then it gives that trustee responsibility to the lieutenant governor. And so in my world, this is where I became really passionate about this, is that that's like saying, let's fire your CFO and your auditor and then give those responsibilities to your CEO. We would never do that in business, so why do we think that would be good for Wisconsin?
Jack, you were treasurer from, help me now, 1995
5 to 2007.
2007.
Right.
And today, the Wisconsin Policy Forum came out with a newsletter on this question, and it said this: in 95-97, which is when you came in, the Office of the Treasurer had a budget of $4.4 million and 23.5 full-time FTE positions. In the current biennium, 2-year cycle, the budget was set at 227,001 FTE just as state treasurer.
Yeah.
What functions, then, has the office lost over that period?
First of all, it was cash management. Second is I assumed also the duties of the EdVest program. That's the college savings program of Wisconsin, as well as that was now roughly $2 billion. I assumed the administrative duties of the local government investment pool, which had control of $3.5 billion, as well as the $500 million of unclaimed money. So those are the various aspects, plus it had voting power, policy making of the Commission of Public Lands. That's $1 billion there. So those duties was intentionally removed, I believe, by the governor as well as the legislature to make the office a shell. And so that's what's happened in the last 11 years since I've been gone. And so it's very easy for the public to say, well, the office doesn't do anything. Well, it was intentionally removed to move those duties to the Department of Administration, basically, or the executive branch.
Now, so the treasurer no longer does unclaimed property, is that right?
That's correct.
That went to the Department of Revenue,
Yes.
Sarah?
Yeah, it's part of the Department of Administration, and but the role of now the treasurer is to promote that. So to actually make sure people even know that there's a program out there where if you didn't get a paycheck, it's in this potentially unclaimed property program, and you should get your money back. So the treasurer is responsible for letting Wisconsinites know about it.
Why were all these important functions taken away from the office that you held for that period?
Well, I think it's, again, all governors, regardless of party, want more fiscal control. And it's very easy to say that whoever has the gold will rule. And again, I think the respect of our Constitution is very important, what our founding fathers have said. But again, it's technology and everything else. The founding fathers didn't want to specifically state what duties should be other than the Commission of Public Lands. It was because they knew over a period of time the function could change what the legislature and the governor would want. But by doing this, we remove the financial voice in this state, remove the checks and balances that was intended back 170 years ago. So it's very important that we respect our Constitution. We also make certain that the duties that are assigned at the time, matter of fact, the person who introduced the resolution to remove and to create the referendum, Shara, Representative Shara of Oshkosh, said, yeah, he said, well, if we lose, if the vote no prevails, we'll bring the duties back. Now, that's sort of ironic in itself by saying, we'll bring the duties back to the Treasurer's office. I mean, again, I really believe it was intentional to give the governor and the legislature fight over the money as opposed to having a separate voice.
And I was going to say, Stephen, and to chime in, I think if Wisconsinites are frustrated with what's been happening in the Treasurer's office, I think remove the person, not the position. I mean, we look at what's going on right now in government, and some people might be really frustrated with the President of the United States. You don't just all of a sudden say, let's just get rid of the presidency. You say, let's remove the person, not the position.
How is your organization organized and trying to work to get voters to vote no against this constitutional amendment? I mean, are you spending money? You're obviously doing public service shows like this, but how else? Is there a very organized effort to keep this job?
There are many different groups that are going to be chiming in on this issue. I don't know who all they are at the present time, but there are other organizations and governmental agencies as well that are going to be making a comment, I think, in the next 2 weeks. So it's sort of like almost like the past election for Supreme Court. There was really no media or nothing was discussed really with the public.
All the attention is focused on the Supreme Court race.
Right, and as well now as before the primary for that office, but nobody knew who the candidates were, and they probably still do not know who the candidates really are. And so this is becoming, hopefully, that we're now a small snowball, and I think it'll get bigger as the next few days occur. This is going to happen, I believe. The media will start saying, the media is being going to take responsibility to some extent to say there is an election on this office to eliminate it. And the idea, why should we be eliminating the financial voice of this state?
Does your group have a budget? Is it going to spend X amount of money by April 3rd?
So, Steve, we're a grassroots organization, and we have really built this based on understanding what it impacts. And so, you know, whether you have people like me who are concerned from the fiscal responsibility and kind of constitutional piece to educational groups, I mean, this responsibility, this office, the treasurer, helps to oversee the Common School Fund. The Common School Fund provides over $32.1 million to public schools. Mm-hmm. That's about $27 per student, which local government doesn't have to make up. And so education now is kind of stepping in to say, this money is important for our public schools. Or with the land management. I mean, this office helps again to oversee the 80,000 acres of public lands. Access to public lands is a big issue. And so if there is at risk where they can sell these public lands off, you know, people are caring about that. Or it's been interesting because one of the things that this fund also does is it provides money for localities. So if they need to borrow money, they can go to the trust fund to borrow money at a low interest rate. So it has, for example, provided over $1.2 million in unfunded pension liabilities. And so whether it's retirees or public school teachers or local governments, I mean, this touches 72 counties across the state.
Is there any organizations, plural or singular, out there voting to have this amendment pass, to the best of your knowledge?
I think, Sarah, I don't know, you're closer to that than I am. I think there's a lot of grassroots people out there discussing it now at different levels, and I think you'll hear more about the next 10 days of different organizations stepping forward to say, vote no on this entire referendum.
Jack, as a member of the Board of Commissioners of Public Lands for 12 years, why would the lieutenant governor not be the best one to be the third member of the board?
Again, it flies in the face.
Whether it's a Democrat or a
no,
Republican.
it flies in the face of what initially, when the founding fathers said, is that we don't want the executive branch to be involved in the decision-making process of funding common school trust funds into the public school systems. See, there was a bill, a Senate bill that was proposed to transfer the $1.2 billion to the state of Wisconsin Investment Board. Mm-hmm. We don't know what the board will do with that money. Right now, we know where the money goes, how it's invested, how it's earned, and invested and distributed. But once that money is transferred over to the state of Wisconsin Investment Board, that could be an entirely different matter, as well as what will happen to those timber lands. And the lieutenant governor will listen very promptly, I think, on the behalf of the governor. So you're getting the executive voice of how to pursue the policy of the Commission of Public Lands. So what's going to happen, and what's happened to the Treasurer's Office as well as Secretary of State's office, they are now attempting to make the Commission of Public Lands as a shell agency. Once you remove all the duties, all the staff, you shift it to the administration, then they'll put that on the ballot as well. So that's next, I think, what's going to happen. If this referendum is approved by the voters, they'll put the Commission of Public Lands on the ballot to remove this. It's the only state agency is a constitutional agency. Most people don't realize that.
Sarah, let's play this out. If the Office of State Treasurer is kept, its budget is one person.
Yep.
So it would not have any more dramatic duties.
Yep.
So wouldn't it still, is it worth keeping, I guess, with one FTE?
Yeah, because I think it goes back to that individual should be looking at how are we spending taxpayer dollars? And I think that individual should be looking at the financial integrity of the trust funds. So when you look at who is the best person to ensure these trust funds actually go to public schools, the way that our founding fathers designed it in 1848, it's an independent executive office. And that independent executive office that doesn't have any other interests, like in the budget process, is the treasurer to do that. And I think that that person can still do these responsibilities, but further educate the public on what's going on. I mean, Steve, I'll be honest, I'm just shocked that Wisconsin, unlike almost 49 other states, isn't as familiar with what treasurers do in states. Mm-hmm. And I think part of this responsibility for whomever takes it over is educating people on the value it brings, so they can really see how it can impact their day-to-day life.
Can I make this comment regarding it's more than being a bean counter, as most people think. The treasurers are actually counting numbers and things of this nature. But more important than that is that the fiscal voice. When I was treasurer, I did a number of things outside of the realm of being an administrator of various programs. I spoke out against Scott McCallum when he decided to take the tobacco settlement money of $5.9 million. Remember that?
Who was a member of your party?
Yep. Yes, he was. And I said, Scott, don't take the money, make the hard decision. But he cashed it in for $1 billion. And to this date, we would still have $325 million coming into our state budget if we had not taken the lump sum settlement of that bill, for example. I helped save the Advest program. I saw Elliot Spitzer, at that time the Attorney General from New York.
State of New York.
State of New York. He was shutting down all these different investments in the states that had done business with New York, for example. And I met with him personally, with another treasurer from Utah. And we said, if Dick Strong, who was in charge of that his organization, if he had done something wrong, penalize him, remove him. But I saved over 1,000 workers by having a handshake agreement with Elliot Spitzer by saying it's the individual, not the organization itself. If he did misdeeds, punish him, but save the employees and save this program, because I think it's very important, because those investments were good, but he did some things individually he should not have done.
Do you want your old job back, Jack?
My wife said no.
Okay. that would take care of that.
I would say so.
Wouldn't it? Okay.
But the point is that I think there's other individuals in this state can step forward and have that financial voice, or like I did, is that it's not a party, it's about the right thing to do for the citizens of this state, of our financial system.
And I think, honestly, Steve, it goes to money's not red and it's not blue, it's green. And I think that's exactly the mindset that our founding fathers had when they developed it, to create this independent function that could really be taxpayers' voice with regarding how we are managing and executing our money.
Within the last year, I taped a Newsmakers show like this with the state treasurer, and his point was that we could save a lot of money by buying and not renting buildings. So has he been doing a good job, Mr. Former Treasurer?
Well, some people say he's done a terrible job because his background comes from being with Leo Buchner, for example, and I think Tyler August. So he has the viewpoint of being another legislator. He doesn't think about the real responsibility of being a constitutional officer.
Okay.
And I really believe, before I left, I was trying to persuade other state treasurers to sue the federal government because I believe, and Oklahoma did it. They sued the federal government for the Unclaimed Property program of unredeemed U.S. savings bonds have matured, and there's like over $300 million that Wisconsin should be getting back from the federal government. But no one has taken up the cause.
Are you the only former state treasurer that's taken the position to save the job?
Well,
you got beat in
by
Dawn Marie Sass.
Dawn Marie Sass.
Has she taken a position?
I don't know. I don't know what she's done, other than maybe still cutting her lawn yet. But the point is, I hate to say that, but the point is that I think she and the two other treasurers since have taken the position that we can save money. I believe being the financial voice and the checks and balances of power is priceless to the citizens of the state, more than just a few pennies here or there. If it was such a bad situation, if there was some programs that were done incorrectly or not proper, why weren't those duties and those responsibilities eliminated? They were just transferred to the executive branch. There has been no change other than they want to remove the financial voice, not necessarily the money that is involved. Money is irrelevant in a way. It's a priceless item of being the financial voice of the state.
Between now and April 3, is Save Our Fiscal Watchdog going to be able to run any ads? Or are you going to continue with
We're
the grass?
seeking that out. But
Did you plan any ads?
I plan to probably do some personal ads on radio. Senator Mike Ellis is on board to say this office. As you well know, that there's been a number of times when I was treasurer and since then that there was an attempt by the legislature as the governor to bring those duties under their control. But I had, for example, Dave Prosser, Mike Ellis, Sheila Harsdorf, I just go on and different senators saying this office has a lot of potential. And that's the reason why this never got to this point. Now they have the number of people, there's been a whole change, a new environment, new people that no longer exist when I was there.
Please, sir.
Yeah, and I think, Steve, what I have found since kind of stumbling upon this issue is that it just goes back to lack of awareness. And so when you start going in front of groups or even talking to my neighbors, they're like, I had no idea this is even going to be on the ballot. And I mentioned that, it's actually passed the legislature twice, and now it finally goes to the vote of the people to decide if we should really remove this. And so it's interesting because they're disturbed on two ends. One is, why didn't we know about this? And then two, removing such a critical role once they understand what's at risk from the Constitution. And so our priority is this last 3 weeks before the election is to make sure we build awareness across the state. So looking at whether it's partnering with our many different organizations, to running ads, to doing online media, digital, but really just getting the word out.
What's your elevator speech? There's a vote on April 3. I want you to keep the state treasurer, and you've got 20 seconds in an elevator. Here's why.
Yeah, my elevator speech is that vote no on April 3rd to protect our fiscal watchdog, because Wisconsin taxpayers have the right to know how their money is spent.
And your elevator speech?
My elevator speech says just say no, because we need a financial watchdog separate from the legislature as well as the executive branch of government.
Okay, and let's end it this way. Someone who is intrigued by this issue, wants more information, where can they get it from your group? This is an attempt, give a naked plug to your website.
Right, so that is a great question,
I thought you might like it.
So we have all of the information you need at saveourfiscalwatchdog.org.
Is that one word?
One word. So saveourfiscalwatchdog.org. And they can find out, I mean, we specifically have a section that's titled, How Does This Impact You? So within their community, within their schools, but they can find out more what's at risk if we don't vote no.
Is this your first quasi-political campaign?
Yes.
Lessons learned?
Just
She's learning every day.
Yeah, failure's never fatal, I guess, and you just gotta always smile. So.
Okay. Any PS, Mr. Former Treasurer?
Well, she may run for office. Who knows?
I think we gotta put our head
We
down
gotta
on
get
what we want to do.
It's right.
Is this winnable, team? 3 weeks?
I think it is. I think it really is. But again, public awareness is important. As you said, we may only have a 10% voter turnout.
10 or 11 or 12.
Right.
Yeah, we're in that range, depending upon how much is driven by the Supreme Court race, how much money is being sent out there to get those people motivated to vote. And of course, we're on the down ticket to vote.
And I think this is absolutely winnable, Steve, because Wisconsinites care about where their money is. I mean, people live paycheck to paycheck. They save whether to buy a business, they're saving money. And so if they're so concerned about their money and how they're spending it, they want to make sure government is taking the same precautions. Okay. And so removing this role would be removing that it would be careless.
Okay. Sarah Godlewski and former State Treasurer Jack Voigt, they are leading the Save Our Fiscal Watchdog campaign, and the vote is April 3rd. And you can go to what website again?
SaveOurFiscalWatchdog.org.
Okay, and it's an important issue. I want to thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for letting
Thanks,
us
Steve,
be
for
here.
having us.
Thank you, Steve.